Hello and welcome to the final installation of our 8-part webinar series on the 2020 Bicycle Market Overview Report written by Jay Townley and Human Powered Solutions. We are so happy to have you here to talk about what the bike shop of the future will look like. And thank you for everyone who's attended multiple parts of this series. We're really excited to go on to our next series, which you can see on our calendar on NBDA.com. But I think that's all I have in way of an intro, and I can push it over to Heather just real quick to say hi.
Thanks, Rochelle. Yeah, we're really excited for today's webinar. What will the bike shop of the future look like? It's a question that has been on the tip of everyone's tongue. We heard a lot of retailers talking about this at the CABDA Midwest show. We're looking forward to seeing everyone at CABDA West, CABDA East, and Philly Bike Expo. And I was speaking with Jay just a couple minutes ago about this presentation. And as Rochelle said, we're moving into another series of presentations about the supply chain. We know that you want to know accurate information so you can best plan for what to expect. And we are committed to keeping you as informed as we possibly can. And again, special thanks to Jay and the entire team at Human Powered Solutions for helping the NBDA with this. And I'll turn it over to Jay.
Oh, thank you, Heather. And thanks, Rochelle, for the introduction. We will go through the webinar, and then as we have in the past, there will be a question and answer session. If you think of questions that we don't get to, certainly send them to the NBDA and they'll forward them on to me, and I'll do my best to answer them. Also, for those of you that have been attending these webinars, I'm going to stop my video so that we can focus on the screens. And as both Heather and Rochelle said, this is what will the bike shop of the future look like. And I can tell you from the onset, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I do completely believe no matter what the future is, there will be bike shops, there will be bicycles, so that we are going to continue the bike shop channel of trade in some way, shape, or form. What we're going to look at here are some of the ideas that we've come across that are part and parcel of what we see for the future. And also, as I was explaining, for those of you that have been through this with me before, it takes a while to get to the first slide. And if you'll bear with me, I am going to, this is interesting. Here we go. See, it takes a bit to get to the first part of the introduction. So how do you best use the NBDA U.S. Bicycle Market Overview 2020 report? As you're aware, this is the 8th and final webinar in this series based on the NBDA U.S. Bicycle Market Overview 2020 report. And what we recommend is, and I'm assuming that you've either just bought the report or have it or about to buy it, and you're attending this webinar to see if you want to buy the 120-page report with all the material in it. So what we recommend is that you read through the whole report, all 120 pages, pace yourself. If you can do that in one setting, cool. However, if you want to break it up over a couple of days, that also makes eminent sense. Determine which of the chapters and the data sets that you find in that report will be most helpful for your business and for your strategic plan. And then go back and carefully study the last 4 chapters that are full of information about suggested business strategies and see what is most applicable to your business. And from the standpoint of the takeaways from this webinar, from the previous 7 webinars, and you can certainly listen to those because they've been recorded and are available, as this webinar will be, on the NBDA website. So in addition to the report, you can also go back and look at all of the total of 8 webinars that are drawn from the chapters of the overview report. So takeaways: write down your most important findings from the 2020 report. Write them down. Get a piece of paper or get your computer and put it in writing. It's been found in a number of different studies, but researchers have clearly found that if you're in business and you want to do a business plan, you want to work on your strategies, the first thing you've got to do is make sure you write it down. Get it committed in some form so you can change it and you can adjust it. Number two, commit to your own business plan. After you've written it down, you commit to it, your family commits to it, your family of employees commits to it, and you also draw from your business plan the financial best benchmarks. They're called KPIs, key performance indicators. And if you need help with those, contact the NBDA. We also recommend that you take a look at your NBDA membership. And I do this all the time now. I talked to a good NBDA member at the Cabinet show we just attended last week in Schaumburg. And I said, are you an NBDA member? They said, yes. I said, are you sure? Yep. Oh, yeah. Yep. We're sure. And when we checked with Rochelle, we found out that their membership had lapsed. I do this all the time with LAB memberships and with AARP memberships. Are you a member? Yep. But in turn, I forget that I have not renewed. So make sure you take the renewal date for your membership, write it on your calendar, put it into your Outlook calendar, whatever calendar you keep, and make sure you renew in a prompt and timely fashion. Lastly, as far as we're concerned, one of the key takeaways from all of our webinars and from the overview report is joining an NBDA P2 group. P2 groups are 20 groups, as they're called in some other industries. But the point is that there are up to 20 retailers that are of relatively like size from different geographic parts of the country, geographically dispersed so as not to run afoul of the antitrust laws of this country, that in turn can join together and share financial information, operating information, and act as your own group, your own advisory group, and your own group of counselors who are in the business day to day, who can help you formulate not only your business plan, determine what KPIs are most important, but you can do comparisons with them of how they're doing so you can benchmark as you go forward. And it's somebody you can pick up the phone or email and talk to on a regular basis about your business and how to make it successful. So that leads to today's agenda. And we're going to go through the question of how many bike shops are there in the United States? We don't care about the world, but how many bike shops are there in America? And that number has gone up and down. And as you'll see, going back into some of the reports that were written, the trend line showed a decline in the number of dealers. I'm here and happy to tell you that didn't happen. We're going to look at the 5 types of American bike shops. And there's general agreement among most of the consultants and the seers in the business that there are 5 types of American bike shops: the multi-store chains, the brand stores, the specialty independents, true IBDs as we call them, new waves, the new wave stores, including mobile, and the online. And then from that, we're going to look at what will the bike shop of the future look like? As I said, I don't know for sure, but there are some key indicators, some trends that right now today give us an idea of how we can start to paint the picture. And we'll summarize that and we'll move on to a Q&A session. So how many bike shops are there? This is the chart I was referring to. This is actually from the market overview report, where we looked at the number of bike shop storefronts from January of 2003 through the same period, January 2013. Now, that was the last time that this type of information and data was available in the form that we used. And then we put a trend line in going out to 2018. And the point here is that back when we did this, which was in 2016, we were looking at a declining number of dealers that came down from about 5,000 in 2003, off to the far left here. And we were looking at a declining number to the current year at about 4,000. And the trend line said it's going to come down as we moved into the era we're in now, the 2020, 2021 period. Oops, touched the wrong button. However, from the time that this was done and this information was available, we've had a black swan event in 2020, the unfortunate COVID, and the plague that's on the land at this point. And also, we've had the more current issues of the climate crisis and the climate issues. Now, this is a screenshot from Bicycle Retailer and Industry News, published in June 9th exactly of 2021 of this year. Headline: Vosper, and you, I think, all know Rick Vosper. The more dealer counts change, the more they stay the same. And what this amounts to is, and we can go over to the next slide here. This is from that article. According to Christopher Georger, now Christopher Georger, AKA the Data Wizard, is the founder of Georger Data Systems. The total number of retailers listed in the dealer locators of around 50 U.S. bike brands. And this is exactly how Christopher extracts or gets his data and gets his counts. He extracts information from dealer locators. Now, because there's no other data information like this available today, we readily accept this and use it in the market overview report. So back when Christopher did this in 2021, the early part of the year, he used 50 US bike brands, went to the locators. He found that the number of dealers changed about 0.5% between 2020 and 2021. Now, when you take a look at the data, as of January 2021, the number of retailer locations in the US was 6,822 compared to 6,913 in 2020. Now, if you do the math, you're going to find that there's a 91 dealership difference or dealer difference, and that actually works out to a 1.3% change or decline. But I'm happy to report that the number of dealers in the United States has stayed very close to the 7,000 number. That's what we put in the overview report. We actually opined that the numbers between 7,000 and 7,400, and we'll explain why as we get further into this presentation. But how many bike shops are there in the United States? Well, at this point, according to Christopher Georger and Georgia Data Systems, the Data Wizard says 2021, 6,822, slightly down from the 6,913 found in 2020. Now, this chart is also from the Vosper report from June of 2021, using the Georgia Data Services data. And what it looks at is dealer locations in 2020 and 2021 for the top tier: Trek, Specialized, Giant, and Cannondale. And the line here is 1,400. And you notice that the number of Trek dealer locations went up to that 1,400 unit level year over year, 2020 to 2021. Specialized also went up slightly below, but very close to the Trek number of 1,400. Giant also went up slightly. And they're at, if we go back between 1,000 and 1,200, probably about 1,100, and stayed pretty much the same with a slight increase. The only actually slight decline in the top four was Cannondale, coming off from about the same number as Giant, around 1,100, coming down a bit. So essentially the headline from this article is, as Rick says, about the same, because in the churn and the turnover, there's only been a slight difference from 2020 to 2021. Now that's of interest for a number of reasons, not the least of which is the United States experienced a record number of entrepreneurs who started new businesses in 2020. In fact, in 2020, there were more new businesses opened in the United States than any other time in its history ever. And that number continued to not grow, but maintained a high level, second only to 2020 in 2021 through the August timeframe. So my point is that a record number of Americans started small businesses from 2020 to 2021 and again in 2021. And I'm seriously wondering how many of those got into the bicycle business in some way, shape, or form. And we'll have to wait till we see Rick's report in 2022. But I'm thinking we're going to see increases in the relative numbers of dealers in this country as opposed to a decline. Now, let's move on to the 5 types of American bike shops. And Rick and Christopher generally agree with these descriptions, and I've given them the leeway because they would do it whether I gave them leeway or not, to certainly change this. But so far, we've found general agreement. And looking at multi-store chains, we're showing Eric's brand, bike brands here. Now, Eric's is in several states out of Minneapolis. They've got, I believe, South Dakota. They certainly are in Illinois to the south, in Wisconsin, and are pushing, I believe, 50 stores at this point. Next to them, you'll see Mike's Bikes in California, Northern California to be exact. Mike's is, I believe, 12 locations, and they're of interest. We showed them in the market overview report, but just recently, Mike's Bikes was purchased. Its whole chain was purchased. The management was left in place, so there was no change in philosophy, policies, or management. The ownership changed to Pon Bike, P-O-N, Bike. Pon Bike is owned by Pon Holdings. Pon Holdings is a large Dutch company. They're in several industries and businesses. In the United States, they own luxury car dealerships. And they've done that. This is not new to them. They've done this for decades. So we've had one bit of a change in the multi-store chains, and we get to the future of multi-store chains. I've added the fact that acquisition by Pon Bike or Pon Holdings type companies with market caps of well over 7 billion U.S. And in multiple businesses are now really interested in the top tier bicycle store chains in the U.S. bicycle business. In this group, in addition to Eric's, Mike's, you've got certainly Wheel and Sprocket. You've got Richardson Bike Mart, which just recently changed its name to Bike Mart. Landry's in the eastern part of the country, 7 stores. Conti's on the East Coast, David's World Cycle. So there are a group of 7 to 9 of these large multi-store chains, obviously volume-wise, very large retailers, many of whom carry mainstream top-tier brands. But we do not count in the multi-store chain the Trek own stores. We keep those, as you'll see in this next category of brand stores. They've been reported as having several hundred owned stores in the United States market. We'll certainly work to try to define that number. But the multi-store chains have been growing in the United States. Wheel and Sprocket just opened another 11th store in Illinois. And they're working on several more stores, all in Illinois, that would take them to 12, 13, 14, possibly by the end of the year. Brand stores. I think you've all followed what Trek has been doing relative to acquisition of retailers or opening of stores in key markets. Specialized has just changed its distribution model, or at least is experimenting with a fulfillment center in Austin, Texas. Giant has maintained its authorized dealer program and does not own any stores in the United States. Now, I would point out that in other countries, there are different formats that these brands use. They are all of them, by the way, including Cannondale. In the Asian market, primarily China, Taiwan, and they are in the European markets. In Asia, in China, Trek, Specialized, and Giant all own their retail stores. They may have some independents, but there are large numbers. We've heard over 1,000 stores for at least Trek, Specialized, and Giant in mainland China. So these top tier brands are in the specialty bike retail business in the markets where they're doing business. And in the United States, it's slightly different, as I said, with Trek owning its own retail stores or having a number of stores they own in addition to their independents. Specialized at this point is not buying up stores or buying stores, but does have a fulfillment center that looks like a new format. And then Giant and Cannondale with the traditional independent authorized dealers using authorized dealer agreements. And there are several smaller chains. Now, one of the multi-stores that is also we consider to be a brand store would be Pedigo, which is electric, which has well over 100 stores. We for years have categorized them, or several years have categorized them as a multi-store chain, although they've got an authorized dealer agreement, so they kind of fit in between the multi-store and the brand. Now, these are the IBDs, the third type, specialty independents. And this is a varied group with some multi-store, but you see examples here, just examples, but interesting examples. Roll in the lower left, we talked about in the last webinar we did, because Roll, with 4 stores in the Columbus, Ohio market, also has a line of bicycles for dealers under the Roll label that they import componentry from Taiwan, assemble in a facility in Columbus, Ohio, and they've got 120 partner stores, bike dealers, specialty bike dealers around the country for their unique line of bicycles. We look at this as part of the locally owned phenomenon. And Burt's, lower right, is Buffalo, New York. It's 7 stores. It's Burt's Bicycles and Fitness. And they are in second generation ownership and management. So the specialty independents are the non-brand. And as Burt's indicates, from the number of stores, there are some of them that would be multi-store that we haven't graduated up into the multi-store chain. I think Burt's will go up there next year. So they move back and forth, but this represents, we feel, about 30% to a third, 33 and a third percent to 30% of the bike shops in the United States that are truly the independents. And then we have New Wave. And New Wave is interesting for a number of reasons. To the far left is Heritage Bike and Coffee. Now, this is their first location in Lincoln Park, a suburb of Chicago. But this is indicative of a lot of the New Wave stores that are bike shops. And in the case of Heritage, also have a locally made line of bicycles that they sell through their locations. They now have 4 locations in the Chicago market, all in Chicago neighborhoods. And they also have a very active omni-channel presence, so they sell online. These are not custom bikes. The top prices are below $5,000. Typically, they're $900 to $3,000 with different styles and types. But they have adopted a whole philosophy that we'll talk about as we go through and look at what the bike shop of the future will look like. And part of what they've got here, and what you see also in the store in the middle, which is the same type of format, although they've got liquor, beer built into theirs, as well as coffee, is to develop a third place, develop their retail operations as a third place. The philosophy says there are 3 places that people want to be in America. They want to be at home, they want to be at work, and they want to be at the third place where they feel comfortable, where they feel at home, where they feel welcome. Now, from a retail standpoint, that philosophy is what Panera uses, but more important, it's what the businesses in this country that want folks to look at them as a place to be, look at them as a place where they can set up their computer and work or do correspondence, where they can communicate with the world, where they can meet people, where they can take family, significant others, and enjoy themselves. And so there are in the bicycle world, and we think they're all in the new wave groupings, very much this philosophy that is adapted and has been adapted from the marketing plans of some of the more successful retailers of coffee and of food goods or food restaurant products in this country. To the far right is another piece that we've included in New Wave, and that's mobile. Mobile is becoming more and more popular and became popular during the bike boom, or I'm sorry, the what we now refer to as the surge. But when the COVID hit, and when there was at this point or at that point in 2020, a real run on bicycles, people wanted bikes, they wanted bike service. Mobile became extremely popular because it allowed both personal delivery to home and also curbside services. And mobile operators cropped up and became very popular in the marketplace. And many bike shops also brought a mobile presence into their what had been traditional brick and mortar environments, and also their omni-channel environments with brick and mortar and online, to add another element to the kind of service they could offer during the COVID. Now, New Wave, because like the shop that we described here, the Heritage Bike and Coffee, offers a locally made product, a locally made bicycle line. They're not being picked up and counted in dealer locators. And so we also think that many New Wave, both stores and in the case of the growing chains, again, looking at Heritage with 4 store locations, probably more in the offering, are not being picked up as multi-store, being picked up as IBDs. They're not being picked up at all. But we think that New Wave is part and parcel of what bike shops in the future are going to look like, at least in part, maybe not in whole, but in that part are going to be extremely influential in their markets. The last of the 5 types is online, which also, because of the COVID and the pandemic, grew in their importance in the U.S. market, with many bike shops adopting omni-channel or online presences. So online became very, very important for many reasons. It drove the economy during the COVID because folks weren't going out to restaurants. They weren't using services. They weren't going to the plays or musicals on Broadway. They were not going out for entertainment. They were staying home, but they were getting on the internet and buying stuff. So from the standpoint of online bicycles, to the far left, bikesdirect.com, it's been around for decades, literally for 20 years, very quietly selling direct to consumers. Canyon in the middle was developed in the about 1985 period in Europe, in Germany, spread throughout the European markets, didn't come to this country till pre-COVID, but quickly grew, but did not overwhelm the market. Many people feared that once Canyon came in the market with the whole concept of high performance, high quality road bikes at reasonable, or some considered low prices, that they would sweep the market. And they simply found a market niche, slightly bigger than what they'd had, but certainly did not overwhelm the market. Canyon was so well known in Europe and did such a good job of penetrating the upper end market that they actually are a Grand Tour sponsor. Sorry that we got an extra screen here. That's my cat jumping on my mouse, figuratively. Canyon is indicative, though, of the online sellers. They've got a U.S. presence. They've got U.S. distribution. They've got a U.S. fulfillment center. Bulls on the far right did the same thing, European-based, set up U.S. distribution. Bulls should be extremely important to dealers just from the standpoint of knowledge, because Bulls is owned and operated by the biggest dealer co-op in Germany. Zieg, Z-E-G, called different things in the German market, but Zieg is a dealer co-op, is a powerful force in the Germanic countries and also the total of the European bicycle market, particularly at the mid to high end. And Bulls is one of several brands that the dealer cooperative owns, and in turn is available online as a direct seller and has come into the US market. Now, from the standpoint of data and stats, this table is taken from the US market overview report for 2020. Its source is US Department of Commerce, as you'll see here. And what it does is compare US e-commerce versus total retail sales. So if we swing over to the right, we look at 2020, there is, in round numbers, 4.40 billion in regular brick and mortar retail sales, with 861 billion in online. What that boils down to compared to the previous year, 2019, is online grew from 529 billion in retail dollars to 861 billion in retail dollars, or a jump from 16 to 21% of the retail market. And we understand that online has continued to grow from the data and the numbers. The point is online has become extremely important, and bike shops need to make sure that they've adopted an omni-channel strategy and approach so that they've got an active and interactive website and web offering, so consumers can find them, do business with them 24/7, and in turn be comfortable in a relationship with a retailer that they can do business with at any time. And this simply shows on a national basis how that growth has occurred 2018, 2019 to 2020. What happened with online is what happened with many other things during the COVID. The pandemic-driven consumer at this point adopted online for many reasons, then stayed with online, and online grew from 2019 to 2020, and again from 2020 to 2021 in months, what we had originally forecast as occurring over years. So e-commerce is here, it's here to stay. It's over 20% of all retail. In the bicycle market, we feel it's been between 20 and 25%, an extremely important piece. And it's a crossover where all specialty bicycle retail with brick and mortar can also be omni-channel, as many are. And so if you're not putting up a good website and have an online e-commerce presence, be sure you're taking a strong look at it. So what about the future of these 5 types of stores? Well, you don't have to go through all the verbiage, they're right out of the report, but for multi-store chains, we see them, some being absorbed in stores. And the caveat here is unless some of them can join together to form an effective buying group and develop private label merchandise. Well, that's already being done. There's several of these brands, the multi-store chains that our brands have grouped together, have formed, I don't know if they're formal buying groups, but they are buying together, and they've got some private label brands they're putting into the market. The big change here was the acquisition of Mike's Bikes, as we referenced, by Pond. And so this has made multi-store specialty bike retailers very attractive to the investment community. So that adds another potential for the future. Brand stores. We see more retail locations being purchased or rolled up by brand suppliers. Rolled up, by the way, is a form of investment. But we also see that in the future, brand stores are going to relinquish some of the control they've got in the market on the number of stores that they've got under their brand or under their control. And we also believe that they are going to strengthen their omni-channel business models. And we look for the smallest of the top four struggling to maintain position in the market. So there's going to be a lot of movement within the brand stores as well. Although overall, we see this as a marketing strategy as at least for one of the four brands growing in the marketplace. Especially independents. This, unfortunately, we see right now is the most vulnerable of the types in the grouping of five. That we're going to see some accelerated attrition here, particularly coming out of the post-COVID period, relative to the financial pressure that's being brought to bear on the market because of what we refer to as, at this point, the supply chain nightmare. But as this attrition occurs, new wave, which are also looked at as outlier stores, but the new wave specialty bicycle retailers are going to expand in the market. And eventually, we think will meld into and be looked at as the specialty independents. So that takes us to new wave, which includes mobile. And mobile, by the way, again, is spreading into specialty independent, into the brand, into the multi-store. So that new wave, we think, is going to be emerging as one of the key types of specialty bicycle retailing. And it's also going to move toward micromobility, which to us is, and this is where we would get into where does the e-bike fit? Well, it fits into all these categories. E-bikes as a category, as we've said in previous webinars, is the biggest growth area and has the biggest growth potential in the market. But also the rest of micromobility, which is human-powered or electric assist or all electric, vehicles that are under 500 kilograms gross weight, that's 1,200 and change pounds in gross weight, are going to gain traction overall, both in the new wave stores, also up through especially independent to the brand sellers and on up to the chains. So the new waves in general, as a format, we feel are going to expand to 35–40% share of American bike shop types or more. Leaving online, and bicycle pure plays will, without any brick and mortar, will continue to grow. We feel, again, these are pronouncements and projections. They're going to grow on the back of the growth of the big chunk of retail that has gone to online and continues to go there, so that they will capture, as we said, 20% or more of the American bicycle market. But a percentage of that growth is going to be online by omni-channel formatting through specialty bike retailers. In general, there's a melding going on where we're seeing these five types begin to cross over into each other's territory a bit. And in turn, it's becoming harder and harder to differentiate them. So again, while we don't know for certain, we do know enough from the current trends to begin to paint that picture we talked about, or a series of pictures of the probabilities of what the bike shop of the future is going to look like. And in turn, there are some attributes that we think are going to have to be present. From the new wave model, we think the third place strategy, and the coffee seller, if you didn't catch it, that I was referring to early on, is Starbucks, because their whole marketing philosophy and their whole business plan is built around third place strategies. So that is well worth bringing into any business strategy for especially bike retailer. And one of the trends that the COVID upset, so we're not sure about exactly how the post-COVID world is going to look, but rents were moving up before on a square foot basis pre-COVID. So part of what we were advising prior to the COVID was that with smaller footprints, smaller retail stores, smaller retail space, smaller being better as the philosophy, you would reduce rent and you'd reduce occupancy costs. Now, rents have dropped through the floor because of the COVID, and we're seeing a readjustment of rents. We still think, though, that smaller is better for some markets, depending on the real estate situation, is going to be advisable going into the future. Also, the whole concept of showrooming and curating collections of product. Curating collections of product, we think, is extremely important to the specialty bike retailer going forward. It'll tie into some other trends like the good, better, best approach. But curating means that the dealer and the dealer staff is the one making the decisions about the product selection, so that you present to your consumer a curated line that you and your staff have selected as being what you feel are absolutely the best offerings for your neighborhood, for your community, for your customers. Now, I mentioned a good, better, best merchandising plan. We think this is viable no matter what size the store for many, many reasons. This has also been in retail classes, teaching philosophies, looked at as the good, better, best pricing plan. So it was emerging pre-pandemic as being very compatible with what we referenced as showroom or showrooming and our curated collections and incorporated in the business models. What we're showing here is simply a look at different types of display ideas, but it goes to not only the smaller is the better, but also the simpler approach to display and merchandising, where you can almost see the idea of good, better, best in the way the display ideas are presented, and makes it very easy for both consumers, retail staff, the associates, and the retailer to sell product, to advertise, to promote, generally to make sure that you've got a very efficient way to deal with both inventory, replenishment, and the sales the sales process, the whole process of training, educating, and working with your sales associates. I might note something that I wrote down here to make sure I tell you, and that is to remind you of the Phillips rule. You're wondering what that is. Some of you may not know it. The Phillips rule of bike shop retailing. Harley Phillips is still with us, thank goodness. Former president of the NBDA, retired bike dealer in a small town in Kansas. And Harley's rule that he started to talk to dealers about in the 70s was simple. For your business planning, for your objectives, the Phillips rule states, never, ever sell anything in your bike shop below your cost of doing business. And for that, you need obviously to look at your KPIs, your key performance indicators, but just keep in mind that you don't sell anything in your bike shop below your cost of doing business. A good, better, best merchandising plan and pricing plan helps you do that. So what will a bike shop of the future look like? And we see the highest probability of success for bike shop businesses right now. The models that you develop and the plans you put on paper and then turn into reality. We think that the best probability, the highest chance of success is incorporating some or all of, as I said, the elements of what turn out to be 9 trends. First, become a third place for customers and shoppers. There are shops that, as I said, like Heritage Bike and Coffee, others in the United States, that have turned this into an art and science and are now going multi-store with the philosophy. And they've incorporated into that some of these other characteristics or these other trends. Smaller is better to reduce occupancy cost. Now, this one may shift over time depending on what post-COVID occupancy costs are. But there is the real philosophy here that you can apply in showrooming or showroom retailing, as you saw in the example of some of the smaller footprints, but more importantly is curated collections of merchandise. The selections you make, not that a rep makes, not that a brand makes, that you make for your store, for your customers, for your neighborhood, and it's your recommendation. And obviously you build it around a good, better, best merchandising philosophy. Omni-channel business models are the wave of the future. Omni-channel or online is going to be a bigger piece, is going to be a bigger piece of the specialty bike retail business in the United States. And bike shops throughout the country have to look at omni-channel business models, how they fit, what they will do for them, how they incorporate them. This means a commerce-enabled website. The locally made or locally exclusive brand philosophies are becoming extremely popular. And we've seen different variants in the channel already between what we looked at, and I keep repeating this, but the heritage bicycle and coffee, but also roll. And there's a list of others that we had in our webinar that we presented previous to this one. Used or previously owned bicycles and e-bikes and gear catering to the circular economy. We've seen more and more outdoor retailers and sporting goods and specialty retailers and clothing retailers, both brick and mortar and online, move to previously owned or used merchandise, and building into automatic trade-in or value propositions where if you buy from us, we'll give you X amount. When you bring it back, we'll recycle it, we'll put it back into our previously owned program. We'll make sure that it's available to the circular economy. To the younger consumer that doesn't want to own, is very about the environment and about recycling and making sure that they buy in effect used or previously owned products. Also used very well may be a way in which bike shops can bring in product that they can't get through normal channels because of what we refer to as the supply chain nightmare, which now will last at least for, we think, another year. The good, better, best merchandising approach we pounded on continually, but we feel this is not only good merchandising, but good pricing. It simplifies the process. It makes it easy for your sales staff to sell, for your associates to understand what your curated lines are, and it makes it very, very simple for the consumer to buy from you. So please take a good look at these 8 pieces. The last one we haven't harped on, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I'm just going to mention it, but we've seen it growing in the bike business, 3D printing of service parts. Now, is that a pipe dream? The FAA is currently certifying components for airplane repair for both big commercial jets as well as local airports and personally owned airplanes. They're certifying 3D printed parts. So if the FAA is comfortable that you can put a 3D printed part into an airplane that flies and meets stringent safety requirements, it's fairly easy to translate this to 3D printing service parts. The key is going to be how the brands react to this and how the brands are going to make the software available that allows 3D printing of parts. And right now, titanium is readily available, but it's also the availability of other metals. And I'll get off this because this is one of my favorite topics that I'd like to see grow in the business. So a quick word about the future. There's no question that COVID-19 was a great tragedy. And what we've also got in front of us is the climate crisis. But they have, for the bike industry, created opportunities. The bicycling relevance index, as we call it, the perception that bicycles and bicycling are viable solutions, has been driven forward and implanted into the minds of more consumers than we've ever reached since the original bike boom 47 years ago. The bike industry has spent large amounts of time, money, and energy promoting this whole concept of bicycles as a solution, bicycling as a solution. And while it's sad, it's also opportunistic because the great tragedies of COVID-19, the great tragedy of the climate crisis have both elevated the bicycling relevance index so that now more Americans truly believe and understand and perceive bicycles and bicycling as a solution. Now, 2020 and 2021 are viewed by at least our consulting group, but several others, as inflection points. Points in time where what follows will be really good or really bad. We think for the bicycle and bicycling community, these inflection points will be really good. We can build on them. The sales dollars and revenue that many of us garnered during the tragedy of the COVID-19 and the climate crisis are an added bonus. What they do is provide the financial wherewithal that can truly be used to make the perception of the bicycle and bicycling as being solutions the reality of our future. So in summary, we took a look quickly at how many bike shops there are in the United States, and I'll repeat the answers, about 7,000. We've looked at the 5 types of American bike shops and their future: multi-store chains, the brand-owned stores or the brand stores, specialty independents, the new wave, the outliers, including mobile and online. We also took a look at the trends and what will the bike shop of the future look like. And I'll repeat, we don't know exactly what it'll look like, but I do know this. The bike shop I started in 1957, it won't be the bike shop of the future won't be anything like that. It'll be different. It'll be better. It'll be in keeping with the times, but there will be bike shops and there will be bicycles and bicycling in that future. So from the standpoint of where we are right now, we've gone through our webinar, we've gone through the summary. I think we're pretty close to being on time. And I'm going to go back to getting in the picture here. Rochelle, do we have any questions from the folks that have been following the webinar so far?
Not just yet. If anybody has questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A section and we'll get to them live. But if you do have questions afterward, if you're watching the recording and you have questions, you can send them to us at info@nbda.com or to Jay, who has, I think, a slide with your contact info.
Yeah, and see, well, let me try what you suggested. Oh, I had it and I blew by it. Let's see if I can get it back. Nope. Oh, my. Ah, there it is. I can even make it bigger. Contact information. So please let Heather or Rochelle know what questions you have. If there's any follow-up that you would like to make, or contact me directly. If you think of something, and contact the NBDA after we're through with the webinar, they'll pass it on to me and I will do my best to answer it for you.
We do have a question just in general about you, Jay.
Yes.
What was the bike shop like that you worked back in 1957?
I worked at Hazel Park Cycle Center and Skate Exchange in St. Paul. I've got some old pictures of it, but it's typical of a 1957 storefront. Remembering that when it got cold, we converted the bulk of the bike shop to a skate exchange. So we kind of split the idea, split personality of the business. Now I started when I was a kid, obviously in junior high school, but I started also at the very beginnings of Schwinn promoting George Garner's philosophies of total store. And so over time, we worked at completely remodeling the facility. The 2 dealers I worked for had purchased the business as a fix-it shop from the guys that had started it, and they had a Schwinn franchise. But over time, junior high school and high school, from my standpoint, we completely remodeled, took more floor space, but still, it was a far cry from what eventually was developed as the total store when bike shops came out of those back streets and went on to the high streets, high retail streets of the communities. That's a long way around to saying it really looked old, because it was.
All right, I don't think we have any more questions that are going to come in right now. So again, if you think of it in an hour or in a day, please send it to us and we'll get your question answered for you. So thank you, Jay. Thank you so much for being with us and presenting and doing this entire 8-part series with us. We really appreciate you and everything you've done. So thank you.
Well,
and we
thank
look
you.
forward to the next one.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to the NBDA. Thank you, Rochelle. Thanks, Heather. And thank you to the attendees.
Yeah. Have a nice day, everyone. Thank you so much for being here.